Police allowed to search private homes and any other relevant premises to look for undocumented migrants. Plans to deport these people, including children, to detention centres in third countries to which they have no connection. Calling on public services, health centres or schools perhaps to signal the presence of people without the right papers. Proposed legislation at the EU level has seen dozens of right groups sound the alarm, warning that a US ICE immigration enforcement style could be about to be set up across Europe. Well, to get more insight, we're joined by the director of one of the groups sounding the alarm, the Platform for International Cooperation on Undocumented Migrants, Michele Levoy. Thanks so much for your time and joining us on France 24. Can I start simply by asking you about your reaction to this proposed EU law? What for you is the most worrisome element of it?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I think what we're worrying about is that we see that there might be a possibility for the first time to deport someone, including children, as you've said, against their will to a country that they have no personal connection in, countries that they've never set foot through, where they've only may have ever briefly transited. To do such a policy, this would require massive use of immigration detention and surveillance, as we've seen in cases in other parts of the world, such as Italy, Albania, or Australia's offshore immigration detention schemes, where this has taken place previously. And we feel that this will entail human rights risks, regardless of any safeguards that might be put in place, including the risk that they could be deported to countries where they could face violence and death. But we're also very much concerned about the increase of immigration detention, the length of immigration detention, including for children. We do have global international standards by child rights bodies that children should never be detained for immigration purposes. It's always against their best interests and always a child rights violation. And yet the current legislation and the new proposals still allow it. And so this would increase detention also of children. And of course, what we're especially concerned about are these detection measures. So there's a new proposal that the Council of States made on its own position on this regulation in December, where it proposes so-called investigative measures, which would enable home raids, so without a police warrant, without a judicial warrant. It would also require most likely social services providers to report undocumented migrants to the immigration authorities in order to speed up their return. So we're very concerned that these broad detection measures could also lead to mass surveillance, an increase of the already existing racial profiling that we see throughout Europe, and obligations for professionals, healthcare professionals or social workers, to go against their professional ethics.
Tell us a bit more about how it compares to the reality for undocumented migrants already here today. As you were saying, there's already detention, even child detention going about. Undocumented migrants already hide from the authorities. So what is the situation for them today? It seems somewhat of a vicious circle often as well. You can't get a job without the papers, but you need a job to get the papers.
Indeed. So living as an undocumented migrant today in Europe and other parts of the world means that you most likely have to work because otherwise you cannot survive, in a sense. So we cannot dissociate work without talking about undocumented migrants because it's a reality for the overwhelming majority. But unfortunately, the ways of having decent work are limited. So we know that there's a reality in many different sectors of the economy that rely on workers who have precarious or irregular migration status, but yet there's not the right permits, or the permits aren't long enough, or the permits aren't stable enough. So that is kind of one part of the situation. And the other part is, how do governments currently actually address this situation? So this proposal is calling for more detention, for more deportation, but governments also are regularizing undocumented migrants. We only have to look at Spain, which a couple of weeks ago announced a major regularization that could benefit up to more than 500,000 people. Spain is not an anomaly. It's not an exception. we've actually been looking together with researchers and other institutes at regularization policies and procedures. And we found that the majority of European governments do have something in their laws, or they have done programs in the past decades to regularize people. So we are very concerned about the policy choices that are prioritized, because all of them are policy choices, and governments also have other policy choices on regularization
available to them. So who exactly is pushing for these changes at this EU level of, an increasing crackdown on migration?
Well, we've seen in recent years as governments kind of build coalitions and different parties come into governments, that usually when you have more pressure from the right or the far right, you might see more extreme measures. So, for example, in some coalition governments that we've seen, like Sweden, for example, there's also a very similar proposal that almost now will become law in the coming months, to have detection measures. So to require undocumented migrants to be reported by service professionals to the immigration authorities. The reason why this proposal went through was because of the coalition government and because of the focus on return. So we see that usually when there's trying to cater, in a sense, to more of a rightist agenda, that we see certain proposals being in place. However, I should also note that we see elements of this in the past decades. So we have seen police raids in certain countries in recent decades as well. There is surveillance, racial profiling, not only for people who are from outside the EU, but even of of EU citizens, is a reality in Europe. And so when a lot of this is already the reality and there are new legislative proposals focusing on undocumented migrants, it exacerbates and it makes it much more difficult for people to go about their daily lives, and which are already part of the community.
Okay, so you say it's a policy choice, and it's coming perhaps more from the far right than other things. It seems like it's growing across Europe. Migrants are often pointed to as the problem when it comes to a lot of issues such as housing or jobs or any of that. But looking at the cold, hard facts, can you give me just a global idea of the impact migration has on countries and their economies?
Yes, it's overwhelmingly positive. We see this also in Spain. There are individuals in Spain who have irregular migration status are already contributing overwhelmingly to the economy. Having regular status only solidifies that and enables more proper taxes through the regular system. So we have individuals who contribute to societies. Our societies are undoubtedly richer through diversity. We have seen this in time and time again throughout the world. And we see that people, in a sense, live in a more harmonious way when there are regular possibilities for people to live regularly, when they are not faced into exclusion and isolation. And so we see that policy choices can be made, and there's many, many examples. Not only at the national governmental level, but also at the city governmental level. This has also been very encouraging to see our cities that step up and have such policies.
And just finally, before we let you go, I'm wondering, is there a limit to migration that could be or should be put in place? And what measures do you think would actually work?
Well, we see what does work are a number of these measures that try to address why do people become undocumented? That actually should be the first question. Not how can we better deport them, but what is causing irregular migration? Why do people, in the overwhelming majority of people who are undocumented, most likely entered the EU regularly? So they did not enter irregularly. They came in as a student, as a worker, as a spouse, etc. And so trying to understand then why did they become undocumented and what can be done to resolve the irregularity should really be the question when we look at irregular migration. Deportation is a very severe policy. It's a very detrimental to human rights. And the EU itself, even when looking at migration management, had considered voluntary return, so allowing people to to try to return to their countries if they wished on their own accord. But even this is deprioritized in the current context. So we're really looking at the experience from governments, from a wide range of stakeholders over many decades, both in the EU and outside the EU, to see where are these promising practices and how can we replicate them.